Sandra Whitlow's boarding house stood at the edge of Cottonwood Street, a wide-shouldered wooden building that looked like it had learned to endure rather than impress. Its paint had faded under years of sun and dust, but the windows were always clean, and the front porch light was never allowed to burn out. Sandra believed a place that welcomed tired men should never look abandoned. She had been running the boarding house for 7 years, ever since her husband died of a fever that swept through town and took more than one good soul with it. Some folks had suggested she sell the place, move in with family, or remarry quickly for security. Sandra did none of those things. Instead, she learned how to manage accounts, mend roofs, and read men the way others read weather signs. The men who stayed with her were mostly lonely. Railroad workers between jobs, ranch hands waiting for the next season. A few drifters who paid for a week and disappeared overnight. They talked loudly at supper, laughed harder than necessary, and told stories that grew longer with every retelling. Sandra listened with polite distance. She served hot meals, clean beds, and steady rules. But she kept her heart locked tight. Then, Harry Cole arrived. He came in late one evening, just as the sun slipped behind the hills. He carried a single worn suitcase and wore a coat that had seen too many winters. He stood in the doorway longer than most, as if deciding whether to step inside or turn back. "You've got a room?" he asked. His voice was low, careful. Not shy, just restrained. "Yes," Sandra replied, studying him. "Meals included. Rules posted by the stairs." He nodded once. "That's fine." Fee paid in cash, didn't haggle, and chose the smallest room at the end of the hall. Sandra noticed he didn't ask about the other boarders, didn't ask how long folks usually stayed, didn't ask anything at all. Harry kept to himself from the start. He ate quietly, usually after the others finished. He never joined card games or arguments by the fire. When spoken to, he answered politely, but briefly, as if words were something to be rationed. Some of the men joked about it. Others ignored him altogether. Sandra noticed everything. She noticed how Harry wiped his boots before stepping inside, how he fixed the loose latch on the back door without being asked, how he always met her eyes when she spoke, even if he didn't say much in return. One morning, she found the woodpile stacked neatly, higher than usual. "Did you do this?" she asked, when she saw him later. "Yes, ma'am. You don't have to." "I know." That was the end of it. At night, when the boarding house settled into creaks and quiet breathing, Sandra sometimes found herself thinking about the man in the last room, about the weight behind his silence, about how some people filled emptiness with noise, others carried it quietly inside. She told herself not to wonder. Men came and went. The house endured. Still, when she passed the end of the hall and saw light under Harry's door, she felt something unfamiliar stir like the beginning of a story she hadn't planned to tell. The boarding house followed a rhythm Sandra could have counted in her sleep. Breakfast at dawn, supper just before sunset. The men shuffled in and out, according to work schedules, weather, and mood. Noise filled the dining room most evenings, boots scraping, chairs dragging, laughter spilling too loudly for the size of the space. Harry Cole never added to it. He sat at the far end of the table when he joined the others, which was rare. Most nights, he waited until the room emptied, then came in quietly with his hat in hand. Sandra always left food warming for him. He never asked, but he always thanked her. "Evening, Mrs. Whitlow." "Evening, Harry." That was usually all. Still, his presence had begun to settle into the house like something permanent. Sandra noticed how the men stopped commenting on his silence after a while. They accepted it the same way they accepted creaking floorboards or the ticking clock in the hall. Harry belonged now, even if he stayed on the edges. One evening, a storm rolled in without warning. Rain lashed against the windows. Thunder rattled the shelves, and the boarding house seemed to draw inward on itself. The men crowded close to the fire, talking over one another, arguing about horses and politics, and whose turn it was to fetch more wood. Sandra moved between the kitchen and dining room, carrying bowls and bread. When she returned, she noticed Harry standing near the wall, uncertain, as if unsure where to sit. "There's space here," she said, pulling out a chair closer to the center of the table. He hesitated. "You're allowed," she added gently. After a moment, he sat. Conversation continued around him, but something shifted. Harry listened more than he spoke. But when one of the men complained about a broken rail line west of town, Harry offered a short comment. Practical.com. Heads turned. A few men nodded. Sandra watched him from across the room, surprised by the ease of it. Later, when the others drifted away, she found Harry still seated, staring into his empty cup. "More coffee?" she asked. "Yes, thank you." She poured and sat across from him without thinking much of it. The rain softened outside, steady and quiet. "You don't like crowds," she said. He considered that. "Not much." "Why stay in a boarding house then?" He looked up, meeting her gaze fully this time. "It's easier to be alone when people are around." The answer lingered between them. Sandra folded her hands together. "You don't have to explain yourself here." "I know." Another pause. Not awkward, just full. After a moment, he added, "You run this place well." She smiled faintly. Someone has to." "You do more than you have to," he said. The words caught her off guard. No one had said that to her in years. That night, as Sandra locked up and blew out the lamps, she realized something unsettling. Harry had spoken more in that single evening than he had in Weeksand, not because he was forced to, because he chose to. In his room at the end of the hall, Harry sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the house settle. He hadn't meant to say as much as he did. Words usually felt dangerous, like doors best left closed. But with Sandra, they came easier. Not many, just enough, he told himself. It meant nothing. Yet when he lay down, he found he was listening not to the wind or the rain, but for her footsteps. The man arrived just after noon, when the boarding house was unusually quiet. Sandra was in the kitchen, kneading dough, when the front door opened harder than necessary. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped into the hall, already preparing a polite greeting. The words never left her mouth. Harry stood frozen near the stairs. Across from him was a broad-shouldered man with sharp eyes and a grin that didn't belong in a decent house. His coat was dusty, his boots loud against the floor, and his presence felt like it pushed the air out of the room. "Well now," the man said, eyes locked on Harry. "I'll be damned." Harry didn't move. His jaw tightened, the only sign of recognition. Sandra stepped forward. "If you're looking for a room—" "Not yet," the man interrupted, never looking at her. "Didn't expect to find you here, Cole." Harry's voice was quiet, but firm. "You should go." The man laughed, sharp and humorless. "That's no way to greet an old acquaintance." Sandra felt the tension like a wire pulled too tight. She placed herself slightly between them, her posture calm but unyielding. "This is my house. You'll mind your manners or leave." The man finally looked at her, eyebrow lifting. "Didn't mean to offend, ma'am. Just surprised, that's all." Harry shifted then, stepping away from the stairs. "Lowell," he said. "Don't." Lowell Briggs smiled wider. "Still don't talk much, I see." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crack. After a long moment, Lowell tipped his hat toward Sandra. "I'll come back later." When he left, the house seemed to breathe again. Harry turned away, heading for the back door. "Fairy," Sandra called. He stopped, but didn't face her. "You don't have to run," she said. "I do," he replied. From him, they sat later in the parlor, the lamps lit low. Harry's hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. "He knew you," Sandra said, carefully. Harry nodded. "From before." "Before what?" He stared at the floor. "Before I stopped talking." The words came slowly, halting at first, then steadier. He told her about the ranch he once worked, about the fight that turned ugly, about his younger brother who trusted him to speak up and paid for Harry's silence with his life. "I learned something that day," Harry said. "Words don't always save people. Sometimes they just make things worse." Sandra reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. "You stayed quiet to survive," she said. He shook his head. I stayed quiet because I was afraid of saying the wrong thing again. She squeezed his hand gently. Silence can hurt too. He looked at her then, truly looked, eyes full of something raw and unguarded. That's what scares me. Outside, the wind shifted. Inside, something between them changed. Something neither of them could ignore anymore. Harry had been running from his past, but it had finally found him. Lowell Briggs did not return the next day, nor the one after that. But his presence lingered, like a bad smell that refused to fade. Harry felt it in the way his shoulders stayed tight, in how he scanned the street before stepping outside. In the restless nights where sleep came in short, shallow stretches. Sandra noticed all of it. She didn't ask questions right away. She had learned that some truths needed time before they were ready to be spoken. Instead, she made space-quiet breakfasts, unspoken understanding, and small gestures that said, "You're safe here." Even if she never said the words aloud. Harry began helping more openly around the boarding house. He fixed the sagging porch step, repaired a leaking pipe, and even sat with the other men in the evenings more often. He still didn't talk much, but when he did, his words carried weight. The men listened. Some even sought his opinion. Sandra watched him change, not into someone louder, but into someone steadier. One afternoon, she found him in the backyard, repairing the fence where a plank had split. "You don't have to do everything yourself," she said. He smiled faintly. "Habit." She leaned against the railing. "You ever think about leaving?" He paused, hammer resting midair. "I did. And now." He drove the nail in with a solid strike. "Now I'm thinking about staying." Her breath caught, though she kept her expression calm. "Staying how long?" He straightened, wiping his hands on his trousers. "As long as you'll have me." The honesty of it left no room for doubt. That evening, Lowell returned. This time, Harry met him on the porch before he could step inside. Sandra watched from the doorway, her heart pounding. "I'm not running," Harry said quietly. "Not anymore." Lowell sneered. "You think hiding behind a woman's house makes you brave?" Harry shook his head. "No, but choosing where I stand does." There were no blows exchanged, no guns drawn, just a long stare, heavy with unfinished business. Finally, Lowell spat in the dirt and backed away. "This ain't over," he muttered. Harry didn't reply. When the man was gone, Sandra stepped onto the porch. "You didn't have to face him alone." Harry turned to her. "I wasn't alone." The words settled deep between them. "I don't talk much," Harry said. "I never will." Sandra smiled gently. "I don't need many words." He looked at her, searching. "You've spent your life taking care of others." "Yes." "Does anyone take care of you?" She hesitated. "I manage." Harry reached for her hand, careful, as if afraid she might pull away. "You don't have to manage alone." Her eyes filled before she could stop them. "I didn't expect this," she admitted. "Neither did I," he said. They sat there, hands joined, the silence between them no longer empty, but full of choice. For the first time in years, Harry wasn't running. And for the first time in just as long, Sandra was letting someone stay. Spring came quietly to Cottonwood Street, the way it always did, without announcement, without ceremony. One morning, Sandra noticed green shoots pushing through the dirt along the fence line Harry had repaired. Life, returning in small but determined ways. The boarding house changed with the season. The men noticed it first. Meals felt warmer. Laughter lingered longer. Even the silences seemed softer. Sandra still kept her rules, still rose before dawn, still carried the weight of responsibility with practiced grace, but she no longer carried it alone. Harry stayed, not as a boarder passing time, but as a man who belonged. He fixed things before they broke. He walked with Sandra into town instead of hanging back. He spoke when it mattered, and when he didn't, his presence said enough. The past no longer chased him through every shadow. He had chosen where to stand and who to stand beside. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the porch in gold, Harry stopped beside Sandra and cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he said. She smiled. "That sounds serious." "It is." He met her eyes, steady and sure. This house, it's already a home, but I'd like to make it something more. If you want that too. She didn't pretend not to understand. You're not a man of speeches, she said softly. No, he agreed. So I'll say it plain. I want a life with you. Not loud, not perfect. Just honest. Sandra felt the truth of it, settle deep in her bones. She had spent years sheltering others, keeping her own heart carefully closed. But love, she realized, didn't always arrive in grand declarations. Sometimes it came quiet. Land stayed. Yes, she said. They married in the parlor, on a clear morning, sunlight streaming through lace curtains. Sandra had pressed herself. There was no preacher from the city, no grand celebration, just a few boarders standing awkwardly, hats in hand, and a promise spoken with steady voices. Harry wore his best coat. Sandra held a small bouquet of wildflowers. I do, he said, without hesitation. So do I, she replied. Life went on after that. Much the same, entirely different. Sandra ran the boarding house, as she always had. Harry worked beside her, not in front, not behind. At the end of each day, they sat together on the porch, sharing the kind of silence that felt earned. The lonely men still came and went. But the house on Cottonwood Street was no longer just a stopping place. It was home. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.